or the run rules on the diamond at Love's Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Mainline Podcast. I'm Adam Jaquez. He's Tyler Burton. Today we're talking about some early betting lines, kind of do something that we normally do in the season and picking some lines against the spread for Oklahoma and some of their big games this year. And then we'll talk about the puzzle pieces that is the offensive line right now. I think there's something there that will actually surprise a lot of OU fans and probably give you a lot of hope for that offensive line. So don't like and subscribe to the video or go give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts yet. Do it later. I have something I think will earn that like, earn that subscribe, but hold off on it just for a moment. Tyler, how are you this evening?
I'm good, Adam. Things are good out here in Denver. The weather is absolutely beautiful right now. Playing a lot of golf. Things are fantastic right now. NBA playoffs are officially done. Now we've got a little bit of Major League Baseball. College World Series is coming down to the wire here over the next few days, and then the final countdown to not just SEC Media Days, but also the opening weekend of kickoff for the college football season. It's getting close to being the best time of the year across the board. But yeah, things are good, man. Obviously, we've got a lot of good things to talk about tonight. It's going to be a little bit of a short podcast. You know, kind of during this time of the year, you've got to get creative in manufacturing some content. We've got a couple nice things that we're going to discuss tonight. Ultimately, you kind of teased it just a second ago, solving the O-line puzzle. You actually put something in the group chat over the weekend that kind of stumped 2 or 3 of us that were part of that conversation. We'll touch on that here a little bit tonight. We'll see if our listeners will enjoy. We'll see if they can get this, what's going to be asked of them here in just a little bit. But yeah, Adam, things are good right now. Obviously, Circus Sports, they do a fantastic job each and every single year, putting out the early betting lines, generating buzz, getting the fan bases of all these college football teams around the country, getting them excitement, trying to talk about, why this team is so much better than this team, why this team should be favored or why this team shouldn't be an underdog for these particular games of the season. So we'll just kind of dive into this, Adam. Circus Sports, they did release the lines for the college football games of the year. So we'll kind of give our early thoughts on that and really trying to answer the question of, did Vegas get this right and what side of the fence are we going to be on here? I think they had 5 different Oklahoma games as a part of this.
We've got 6. We've got 6 games. Yeah, and for those that maybe haven't listened to us in season, what we normally do at the end of every week's episode is we go through our 5 best picks against the spread, over, under, whatever it might be that we choose. And we kind of have a little competition as we go throughout the season. So we'll kind of do that here with these 6 games, starting off with the first one of the year, Tennessee traveling to Norman for the SEC opener for the Sooners. Oklahoma, a 2-point favorite at home. Tyler, I'll let you go first there, picking that one.
It's essentially a pick 'em anytime that you're playing on your home field. The Vegas, pretty much the general consensus is it's worth about a 3-point differential, you being able to play it on your home field. So essentially on a neutral side, this would either be a pick 'em or Tennessee would be favored by 1 point. And, Adam, I think that when you try to peel back the curtain here and you look at Oklahoma's schedule, as daunting as it is, the Tennessee game is really one that sticks out for me because all the different storylines that are going to be going into this matchup. Obviously, Josh Heupel, former Oklahoma quarterback, won the last national championship for Oklahoma in the year 2000. God, I cannot believe it's been that long ago. But he's making his return to Norman. You've got Nico versus Jackson Arnold, 2 quarterbacks, 2 5-stars, 2 of the best young prospects in the country going to be going at it. The Tennessee front 7, who's going to have a couple of, NFL day 1, day 2 type bodies in that front 7 going up against the Sooners offensive line. This is going to be the first major test for Bill Bedenbaugh's group this season. You're really going to find out a lot this game where Oklahoma is physically in the trenches. First SEC game for Oklahoma. It's most likely going to be a night game. The Palace is going to be rocking. The fans, the students are going to be juiced up. If I had to bet one side here, I think I'm going to go Oklahoma, and I'm going to take the 2 points just simply because there's so much going in Oklahoma's favor. The team's going to be up for this. The fan base is going to be pumped up, ready to go. I think that Josh Heupel comes into Norman, in what's going to be the opener for Oklahoma in the SEC. Sooners are going to get the dub.
I'll take Oklahoma to cover as well. I don't feel great about it, though, because I feel like this almost seems like a trap game for OU in the sense that there's going to be so much headlines, news, talk about, it's OU's first game in the SEC. It's all about Oklahoma this, Oklahoma that. And Tennessee comes into town, really no one really talking about them, I think. I think it's going to be more about just OU and the fans and this new conference that they're in.
Yeah.
And it just feels like an opportunity for Tennessee to kind of come in with nothing to lose, really, in a sense. Although they are a very good program, a very good team. I think there's a lot of similarities between where these teams are going into the year. They had more of a building block season last year, both programs, and now transition into a new quarterback that should be the future that they all want to see live up to the hype. But overall, I think Oklahoma as a program, more depth across the board for, pretty much every position for the most part. This is Tennessee's just a tier below Oklahoma in terms of like where they are as a program. So I think that will play out, and it may be a little bit of a rocky start, no pun intended, for Tennessee there. But I think Oklahoma will be able to pull out the win here by more than 2 points.
Well, and Adam, I think you make a good point. This is something that Oklahoma fans are going to get used to. Gone are the days where you're going to have an Iowa State or a Kansas or, some of these lower tier Big 12 teams come in and expect that Oklahoma, if they play well, they're going to beat these teams by, 28 to 30 points. That's just simply
which didn't happen very often, to be honest.
moving up to another level of competition in the SEC. Playing your best brand of football might only result in a 7 or maybe even a 10-point win if you play really, really good. So you kind of have to tamper your expectations a little bit. It's a new style, new brand of football that Oklahoma is going to be playing in now that they're in the SEC, just simply because the competition from top to bottom is that much better. And we'll find that out here in just a few months' time. Moving on to the second game, Adam, that Vegas released here, OU Texas, and Vegas. It is what it is. It's June.
It's come down from where it opened.
OU versus Texas. Last time that I saw it, it was at 8. Is it still at 8 right now, Adam?
That's what it is now. I think it opened around like 10, 11 and a half or so. So it has come down, which is appropriate for that game. It's almost always going to be a one-score game.
Absolutely. 8 points is probably still a little too rich for my liking. We have seen just a few blowouts over the course of this series in the last couple of decades, but throw the record books out the window. It doesn't matter what you've done going into that game. For the first few weeks of the season, OU Texas, it's always a battle. Throw the record books out the window. Anybody on any sideline is going to have an opportunity to make plays and have an opportunity to win that game. Adam, I'm going to bring up something here that it kind of feels like is going to be a common theme for a lot of opponents that Oklahoma's going to be facing. Texas gets a bye the week before. Oklahoma does not. So you're talking.
I'm pretty sure. We get a bye? We do. Yeah, both teams get a bye. Yeah.
So Texas gets a bye anytime that Steve Sarkisian is able to have just a few more extra days of prep practice with Quinn Ewers, who's a system quarterback. We can dive on that a little bit further into this upcoming summer and especially once we get to that game week. I'm still not sold on Quinn Ewers. Still don't know if he's the best quarterback in that position room in Austin right now, but he is a system quarterback, and anytime that Quinn Ewers has an opportunity with Steve Sarkisian to be able to really drill in that game plan, to be able to really kind of focus in on what the other team's defense is, what the weaknesses are. Obviously, it didn't help him out last year, but I think that Steve Sarkisian is going to be able to put Texas into some really good positions here. So for that reason, I'm going to take Oklahoma, but I still think that this has an opportunity to possibly be a 1, maybe even a 2-score game.
As far as what we saw in this game last year, Oklahoma was the more physical team, the team that really wanted that game more, in my opinion. I think Texas will obviously be very motivated. They don't want to come out and do the same thing they did last year. But I think overall, like, OU is still the more physical program here. Yes. And I expect to see that, especially with the defense that we have. I don't know where the offense is going to be. We're going to talk about the offensive line here in a moment. But I think Oklahoma is going to match up pretty well with Texas. And so I'll take Oklahoma with the points there. I don't know if they'll win it necessarily, but it's going to be close.
Adam, I know that it's cyclical. It happens every single offseason, especially during the summertime. The hype train for Austin, it's full steam ahead going down the tracks. I know that when you look at this roster, I know that the talent is there, and Steve Sarkisian has been able to do something at Texas that Charlie Strong, that Tom Herman simply just haven't been able to, and that is develop talent at a much higher level. And you look at the weapons offensively. Gone is Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and Jadavian Sanders, and they're having to replace a couple of guys on the back end of that defense, along with Sweat and Murphy. And this is a matchup that Oklahoma got the better of Texas in a year ago, and I think that you could make an argument that this is going to be an Oklahoma team, especially on the defensive side of the football, particularly up front in that front seven. Oklahoma is going to be a much better team than what Texas faced a year ago inside the Cotton Bowl. So if Oklahoma is able to get that that productive play from the offensive line and give Jackson Arnold time, paired with what Oklahoma's got at the running back position, I think that this is a very good matchup for Oklahoma. For that reason, 8 points for Texas is far too rich. Give me Oklahoma +8.
Next up, Oklahoma at Ole Miss. We know this is going to be an early kickoff, either 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. There at the Grove. Ole Miss favored by 5 points right now.
Yeah, and to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure that that's high enough. If I was trying to lay a little bit of money on this, I might take an alternative line. I might be able to get it closer to Oklahoma or to Ole Miss in a touchdown. And I'm not saying that that's simply because of lack of faith in Oklahoma, but I think that when you look at Ole Miss with what they've got coming back, especially on the offensive side of the football, I think that they have an argument with Oklahoma, with Ohio State, that they probably have a top 2, maybe even number 1 overall wide receiver core in America right now. They've got Jackson Dart coming back. They've got about 9 different running backs, it feels like, that are on that roster right now that they've gotten in the transfer portal. They had some key additions on the offensive line to go along with Pete Golding, another year in the system there at Oxford with his style of play on defense. The people down in Oxford, they think that this has an opportunity to be not just the most talented, but the best overall team in Ole Miss football history. For that reason, you're going on the road. Yes, it is an 11 a.m. kickoff. That's going to help Oklahoma. Maybe with the atmosphere a little bit, it's not going to give fans as much time during the course of the day to get drunk and liquored up to be ready to go. But I still think that this is a matchup where once you get to this point in the season, this is where you start to have your depth on your football team tested. We think that Oklahoma is just as good as anybody in the country, maybe outside of Ohio State and Georgia, across the board at some of these position groups. But I think that this is really the first matchup that you're going to see how well is Oklahoma from a depth standpoint. And for that reason, if I had to lay some money, give me Ole Miss -5.
I really wanted to find a way to not pick Ole Miss to cover there, but that's where I'm gonna land at the end of the day, because they got so many transfers that are going to be impact guys, specifically Walter Nolan on the interior of the defensive line. So I think they'll match up pretty well, strength against one of our biggest weaknesses. We'll see what things look like on October 26th. But here's another team that gets a bye week right before playing OU. There's going to be more as we go through some of these, but yeah, I don't see Ole Miss struggling really in any area. They look sharp. They look loaded at pretty much every position. Jackson Dart, I think he's nice. I think he probably gets a little more credit than he actually deserves at this point, but maybe this is the year that he really does enter that Heisman contender conversation, because so far he's been good, but not top tier elite in the country at this point. So we'll see. I really, it hurts to like kind of process that as an Oklahoma fan, because you're like, it's Ole Miss. Like this is like the Iowa State of the SEC in a sense. No disrespect there, but like, I know Lane Kiffin has elevated that program, but it still doesn't quite compute there. So I'm trying to find any way to not pick Ole Miss, but I think I have to at this point.
I think on the flip side of it too, and if you really wanted to try and nitpick what Lane Kiffin has done, obviously, you and I are both coming from it from a standpoint of you can't build a sustainable football program relying solely on the transfer portal. I think that it's got to come from the high school ranks to be able to build that foundation, get kids in, as true freshmen, allow them to grow into the program for 2, 3, 4 years. And, you got to give Lane Kiffin credit. Obviously, in the world of NIL that we live in right now, they're taking full advantage of the transfer portal. They're bringing in a lot of highly touted, really extremely talented guys. But the hard part about that is no matter how much talent that you have on your roster, you've got to be able to, mold this group together. You've got to turn this into a group of talented individuals, into a football team that you can, as a coach, you've got to be able to push all the right buttons to be able to get your team really to where, they're able to buy in and play as one, collective unit. So we'll see if Lane Kiffin's able to do that. But again, this probably isn't going to be the last game that I pick, the opposite side. But yeah, give me Ole Miss -5.
Next up, Missouri on the road.
Oh boy.
Another team coming off a bye week playing Oklahoma, this time at home, I guess, for the Tigers there. And Missouri, the 2-point favorite there. Kind of the talk of, I think, one of the talks of the SEC this offseason of Missouri. A lot of people were really high on them, expecting them to go to the playoffs again, or I guess make the playoffs in the 12-team format now. Tyler, who you got in that one?
Yeah, this is really, this is a huge game, not just for Oklahoma, or not just for Missouri, because I think a lot of people out there, they are buying the Missouri hype right now, obviously, coming off of what was one of the best seasons really since Jeremy Maclin was in a Tigers uniform. So Eli Drinkowitz, as much of a clown as he is, does he have the ability to go back to back here and, put Missouri in a situation where they're fighting for a berth in the college football playoff? When you look at Missouri's schedule, really kind of from top to bottom here, there's 7, maybe even 8 wins that you could probably comfortably say, okay, yes, they're going to get to that 8-win benchmark. But then you look at really the 4 toughest games on the schedule for Missouri here. They've got to go to College Station to take on Texas A&M and what's going to be an 11 a.m. kickoff. Then they've got back-to-back games where they've got to play Auburn at home. Then they've got to go on the road to Tuscaloosa to take on Jalen Milroe in Alabama. And then you're very fortunate, especially coming off of the Alabama game, you get the bye week before Oklahoma comes to town. And, Adam, Missouri goes out of their way, I think, to try and make a rivalry with pretty much anybody in the conference. There, and again, you say that for what it is. Missouri fans online are talking about Oklahoma, how they're the new rival now that Oklahoma's part of this conference, and how Missouri is a superior program now that they both have the SEC patch on their chest. Adam, am I going too far and say that this is as far away from a rivalry as you can get when it comes to the actual play on the field? But I think that there's a newfound interest in this game because of what's happened over the last 12 months. You talk about a double-digit win season for Missouri. Missouri, winning a recruiting battle with like Williams Nwaneri, pulling him away from Oklahoma, tampering with Oklahoma players, getting Caden Green to, take the bag and jump ship to go up there to Columbia. I've already talked about the character that is Eli Drinkwitz. Everything going on outside of what's actually happening in between the lines, I think, is what's drawing so much attention to this matchup. And I'll get to my pick here in a second, but I do want to touch on this a little bit more in depth because this is kind of a sneaky under the radar game because it feels like there's so many storylines going on outside of the actual play of the game itself. And I think that that's what's got both fan bases really kind of juiced up and can't wait for this matchup here towards the end of the season.
Well, I kind of feel like there is a rivalry in pretty much every element right now. We'll see if it continues throughout the next 5 years or so, because you look at, the coaches, I don't think they want to, take an L to Missouri, especially with all the recruiting battles that have been lost to the Tigers. You look at the players themselves, losing a teammate in Caden Green, losing a guy in Williams Nwaneri that probably, camped and stayed with a lot of current players right now. Theo Weiss over there, kind of mouthing off a little bit on one of his social media posts within the last 30 days. I don't know if that really means anything, but so there's an element of the players, there's an element of the coaches, and then the fans have kind of experienced just the nastiness of the Missouri fan base, a program that basically says, oh, well, you can't look back in history. Things have changed now. You can only look back at the past year where both teams basically had the same record. So it's kind of funny. And you look back to last year, I don't really know what Missouri's signature win is because the Ohio State, credit, you beat them in the bowl game there when they were playing their, third string quarterback and really didn't want to be in the Cotton Bowl. So outside of that, I guess your best win last year was over K-State, I guess, in week 3. So I don't know. There's a lot of question marks there around Missouri to know, are they actually good or did they just beat all the teams that they should have beaten last year? I don't know.
I mean, you got to give them credit, but at the same time, Kansas State, they did blow a double-digit lead in the final stretch of that game. Missouri did have a nice win at home over what was a top 15 Tennessee team. I think they beat them 36-7
that was good.
off of this. So again, you got to give credit where credit's due. Missouri did some good things last year. There was also kind of a byproduct of what was a weak schedule. They're very fortunate enough to where they're going to get that again this year. But again, when you look at what Missouri's going to have coming back, obviously the attention, it starts with Luther Burden out there on the perimeter. They arguably the best wide receiver in college football going into the season. Theo Weiss, okay, really good player. Obviously, he's ran his mouth a little bit. I know that the Oklahoma secondary is going to be excited to kind of get a piece of him when that game does roll around. I think that this is an instance, Adam, where you try to look and see, okay, where does each team have the advantage? Okay, who's got the advantage of quarterback? Brady Cook right now, if I'm strictly going based off what I've seen so far, who's proven it, I would say that Missouri probably has the edge at quarterback at this stage in the game.
Higher floor, for
higher
sure.
floor. He's been in a lot of games. He's coming off of a double-digit win season in the SEC. Okay, you got to give Brady Cook some credit. We'll see what Jackson Arnold looks like 6-8 weeks into the season when that matchup does roll around. They lose Cody Schrader. I think he was the Doak Walk winner. He was a 2,000-yard rusher at Missouri. White boy, fantastic, phenomenal season. We all know what they've got at the skill position outside. The defense is a little bit of a question mark to me. I think that that's definitely something that Oklahoma will be able to take advantage of depending on how these two teams develop and grow over the course of the first couple months of the season. But call it the recency bias. I think that Missouri, with the rivalry, if that's what you want to call it, with Oklahoma right now, I kind of treat it the same way as Oklahoma State. I know that you've got a lot of really good premier programs that are going to be on your schedule this year, Missouri. I know that you play Alabama, you play Auburn, you've got A&M, you might have Georgia. But make no mistake about it, that Oklahoma game, if you could pick one matchup for your team to go in there and guarantee a win, I think that you're picking Oklahoma, especially with them being the new kid on the block going into this conference. You want to be able to set the tone from the jump and say that Missouri is in a different tier than Oklahoma is at this point. And at this point of both teams' programs right now in the year 2024. But I still think that this is going to be an opportunity where Oklahoma is going to be a much better football team than they are the first couple weeks of the season. I think that, they've got something to prove. Obviously, we've seen the players comment about it. We've seen, coaches comment about it. DeMarco Murray putting some stuff out there on Twitter as well. I think that Oklahoma's team, I think that Oklahoma's coaching staff, they're going to take this one a little bit more personally. I think Oklahoma goes into Columbia and gets it done.
The tweets that you're referencing there from the coaches about Missouri, spurred by a Twitter account out there called @the_mainline_pod. So you guys will want to make sure that you follow them.
Some good stuff that comes out of here.
I've got Oklahoma covering the two there at Missouri as well. I just think Oklahoma's in a different tier, as a program. This is the game that Missouri probably will look forward to and say, yeah, we want to win that game. Same way they looked at Georgia last year. I just think Oklahoma is a better program, top to bottom. They did get some good players that we wanted here at Oklahoma, but they would trade rosters in a heartteat with what Oklahoma has.
Here's all I'll say about this. If the game was played at Oklahoma, you think Missouri's favored by 2?
No,
it's probably be Oklahoma closer to 7-10. So give that for what it's worth. But you got to go on the road and prove it.
Let's go to November 23rd, Alabama coming to town, a 2-point favorite on Owen Field, which is quite unusual, but the Crimson Tide lose quite a bit. A lot of transition there. Not only do you have the coaching staff that's changing over, your top 2 rushers from the running back from the backfield there moved on to the NFL or to transfer to Florida State in Roydell Williams' case. So you've got a younger player, promising sophomore that needs to live up to the hype from the running back position. From the wide receiver side of things, you got Jeremy Bernard transferring in from Washington. You lose some other guys to transfer portal. You lose some guys to the NFL there. So it's Jalen Milroe. Everyone knows the name, but some new pieces surrounding him, some holes along the offensive line that they're going to have to fill. Of course, they've got good players waiting in the wings. Nick Saban left the cupboard, relatively stocked well. And then Kalen DeBoer has done some good things in the transfer portal. But it's hard to get a read on what Alabama is going to be. Are they just going to not skip a beat and Kalen DeBoer is going to be fine? Or is there going to be bumps along the way? Because, you don't just have the greatest coach that's ever coached the game just walk away and things are fine, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Alabama fans out there, they're probably a little bit delusional if they think that Kalen DeBoer is just going to come in here and really just kind of take the baton and run with it from what Nick Saban left. And I know that Nick Saban is no longer on the sidelines, but that Alabama roster is still stacked 2 and 3 deep with blue chip talent at each position. A name for Oklahoma fans that you're going to want to keep in mind. Alabama's got a running back. I think he's going to be a junior right now or a redshirt sophomore, Jamarian Miller. He's going to be a dark horse Heisman Trophy candidate. Kid out of Tyler, Texas. Fantastic player. Alabama's going to be loaded from top to bottom. We could touch on that. He's not fast enough, though, according to the running back coach. We can save that for another episode. But Alabama, it's not technically a bye week, but they do play Mercer the week before. So you would have to anticipate that probably at least 1 or 2 days of practice. There's going to be a little bit of Oklahoma game tape, a little bit of Oklahoma game planning going on. But I think that even though Nick Saban's no longer on staff there, now that he's retired, thank God, I think that Kalen DeBoer is going to be able to elevate Jalen Milroe's quarterback play to a whole other level. I know that he did some really good things with Michael Penix, and I'm not sitting here saying that Jalen Milroe is going to be able to, be as productive throwing the football as Michael Penix was. It's not going to happen. But Jalen Milroe led Alabama to the Final Four last year, won an SEC championship, really is kind of a one type player, one tool player. So I think that Kalen DeBoer is going to be able to really improve his passing game from the pocket. So for that reason, I know that this is tough to say. Give me Alabama -2.
I'm gonna go Oklahoma to cover there and win. Obviously this is the big game for OU at home this season, and I don't know. I just feel like when you change over the staff, Kalen DeBoer's got good processes. I know he does. I mean, he's won everywhere. I know he's got good drills. He's got good team, operations. Everything's going to be good, but things are still going to be different, And I think I mentioned this months ago, just in terms of like, yeah, he may have you get on the bus 30 minutes later than Nick Saban would have. Like little things like that, I feel like add up, and the constant change takes away from just keeping the whole operation rolling in the right direction. And I think they'll be back. I think he'll probably compete for championships there at Alabama. I just wonder if there's going to be more speed bumps until they get there.
Adam, I'll give you an opportunity to pull up Oklahoma's complete schedule here if you don't already have it up already. But if as you're kind of taking a look at this, obviously we're talking about Alabama right now, premier program, obviously huge helmet school. They have been the standard of college football for the better part of the last 15 years or so. But is it clear cut obvious that Alabama is the definitive number one choice, to where if you could look at this schedule and pick out a game that Oklahoma for sure wins, lock this up as a W for me, are you picking Alabama here?
Out of all of OU's schedule?
Out of all of OU's schedule.
I mean, are you just talking like all 12 games? Because I'd pick Temple, right? Would be the lock.
No,
right?
no, I'm saying obviously Oklahoma's going to beat Temple, but if you're talking about when trying to project Oklahoma getting to that next step, climbing the mountaintop to where they are, they're Ohio State, they're Georgia, to where they are the upper echelon. In terms of the trajectory, when talking about, this program, talking about Brent Venables, Oklahoma climbing to that next step, is Alabama the game that you would circle to say, if Oklahoma wins that game, that's clearly a sign that Oklahoma is well on their way? Or is there another game that you would look at and say, hey, I'm not going to pick Alabama as a game that I would, if I could guarantee win, it would be Alabama. It's somebody else.
I think it has to be Alabama. I mean, look at how all the other programs that beat Oklahoma in an upset victory go around and market that win to everybody else. And the same thing that we did to Alabama after that 2013 Sugar Bowl, where Trevor Knight just out of nowhere, goes and dominates them. And we kind of marketed the program off of that for a few years. I know some fans didn't really love that, but 2014, there wasn't a whole lot of good moments to market off of, but we lived off of that for a little bit and got a lot of good recruits based off of that, because we could stick our chests out and say, yeah, we just beat the best program in the country. And Alabama maybe they go 7-5 this year. I don't know. And maybe Oklahoma is one of those 5 losses for them, but you can still go around because of the cachet that Alabama logo holds right now. It doesn't matter if they're 7-5. We can still say, yeah, we beat Alabama. Why would you go to Tuscaloosa, Mr. 5-star defensive lineman, come over to Norman where we're new kids on the block? Same thing that Missouri's doing right now. They won 10 games last year, hadn't done anything all before that, but they're marking their program off of that. So, yeah, that beating Alabama is going to get you further along to where you need to be versus anybody else on the schedule this year.
Even Texas?
Yeah, because we beat Texas all the time.
I like it.
Yeah. Let's go to the last game on the docket here, Oklahoma at LSU. Thanksgiving Saturday, Oklahoma goes on the road to Baton Rouge, and they are 5-point underdogs to the Tigers here.
Yeah, year 3 of Brian Kelly. Jane Daniels goes to the NFL. In steps Garrett Nussmeier at the quarterback position. Nobody is yet quite sure how it's all going to come together down in Baton Rouge, but they've got talent and NFL guys at most position on the field, maybe outside of interior defensive line, as Oklahoma fans have kind of found out with watching the defensive linemen and the transfer portal kind of go and make their selections. But LSU, again, they don't technically have a bye week, but they do play Vanderbilt the week before. So it's going to be a little bit of a different change of pace for them going into the Oklahoma game. Tiger Stadium, Death Valley. Chances are it's definitely for sure either a 2:30, 3:30, or maybe even a 7. Probably safe to say.
Something interesting about that, though, was we talked about last week, I believe it was, when the times came out. The other flex games that day are Texas A&M, Texas. That feels like a night game for sure to me.
That's definitely a night game.
And then Alabama, Auburn, which I can't remember an Iron Bowl ever kicking off at night. So that feels like the afternoon game. So I don't know if that does much as far as where OU is going to play.
Yeah,
I feel like it's going to be a night game opposite Texas A&M.
That has a feeling of the Iron Bowl being the 2:30 primetime CBS game, and then Texas A&M gets the 7 o'clock kickoff with Herb Street and Fowler.
Yeah.
And then maybe Oklahoma, they get the 6:30 or the 6:45 kickoff on ESPN or something. But I would have to think. I mean, at least from a fan standpoint, I'll be attending this game. I want to experience Death Valley at night. I want to go into the toughest possible environment whatsoever. I want to see what all the hype's about. There's a reason why LSU, when you go back and look at the record books over the last 15 to 20 years, why they are such a dominant football team when playing inside Death Valley, especially at night. So yeah, give me LSU -5.
LSU will be pretty good on offense, I think. Not as good as last year, but I think they'll still have all the weapons there to get a lot of points on the scoreboard.
And
go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say, and again, I know that whether it's in the comments section or people that are listening to this, they're probably saying, why is Tyler picking, the opposition, 3 of the last four games here? And I'm not sitting here saying that this has any indictment on what I think of, how good or how bad Oklahoma is going to be as a football team this upcoming year. I think that Oklahoma is going to be a top 10, top 15 team, but I think that there's a lot of other factors that you have to look at when really trying to dissect and project what Oklahoma is going to be able to do this year from a wins and losses standpoint. Again, you go on the road to LSU, you lose by 7. That's depending on how the game's played, depending on, injuries, different things like that. That's not a bad loss in my opinion. So it's not like what we've grown accustomed to, where if Oklahoma goes on the road to K-State and they get beat by 10, then the sky is falling. We're sitting here getting ready to burn the program down. It's just simply not going to be that case anymore. Obviously, we'll have to see how this thing plays out. But at the end of the day, I think that when you talk about Alabama, you talk about LSU, going on the road to Ole Miss, going to Columbia, Missouri, South Carolina's coming, Tennessee's coming. You got the game in Texas, which we kind of glossed over a little bit just because we're so excited about this new blood that Oklahoma is going to be matching up against. This is a very challenging schedule, arguably a top 2, maybe even number 3 toughest schedules in the country across all of college football. There's a different level that Oklahoma is going to have to get to. We'll see how the current state of the program matches up when we kick this thing off here in less than 70 days.
I'll pick Oklahoma to cover. I don't know that I'm picking them to win here.
Interesting.
I think winner makes the playoffs, though. LSU has a fairly soft schedule. I think they'll probably be fighting for the 10th win. If they're 10-2, I think they're in the playoffs. Oklahoma, I think we're probably 8-3 here, maybe 9-2. And I think if you're Oklahoma 9-3 with that schedule and you have wins in the right situations, I think you could be looking at playoffs there. But both teams in great position because you're not going to be in the SEC championship game. You probably are going on the road potentially for your first playoff game, but you might get matched up with the Big 12 champion, which would be very favorable in the second round.
Sure.
Or, potentially even an ACC champion. They might not be as strong this year either. So
that's a great point, Adam. And obviously with the playoff, expanding to 12 teams here, gone are the days where going into the regular, the final week of the regular season where all eyes are going to be on the game between Ohio State and Michigan when talking about, this being really an elimination game for one of the final 4 spots. Now you're going to be in a situation where there's probably going to be a handful of games over, across college football that are going to have an impact on teams being able to, either be a top 4 or 5 seed or possibly be a team that can sneak their way into one of those final couple of spots to earn a berth in the college football playoff. LSU, they open up against USC. Sorry, Lincoln Riley. I know you tried to cancel it. I know you've been trying since you got out there to make this game go away. It's not going to happen. But LSU does have a little bit of a difficult schedule. You've got SC in Las Vegas. You got to go to South Carolina. You've got a game against UCLA, Ole Miss, at Texas A&M, Alabama, down in the swamp in Gainesville. And then you close it out with Oklahoma. I think that this is going to be a very, very trying year for Brian Kelly, especially when you're replacing Jaden Daniels. It's going to be a huge test for Oklahoma. But I'm really excited about the possibility and about the fact that we're going to be going into this season where every single week you're going to be tested. You're going to be able to have to go in there, put your big boy pants on, line up week in and week out, and really test yourself against some of the best overall talent and best teams in college football, where unlike in years past where you've got essentially one game a year, the OU Texas game down in Dallas, where that's really the true measuring stick of where you're at as a program until you get to a college football playoff. And we all know how that's gone for Oklahoma. I'm really excited about what this long 12, 13 game schedule is going to be able to do for Oklahoma, because I really think it's going to, shine a light on where we're at as a program, where we need to get better and where we need to make some adjustments at, whether it's a coaching standpoint, whether it's recruiting, budgeting, NIL, fan engagement. It's going to be a fun test for everybody involved.
Tyler, I already asked you this question, so you know the answer, but the offensive line was one of the ones that we've been focused on. Those who are watching or listening can answer this as I give it off here. But between the programs, Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State, out of which of those programs do you think has the most career offensive line starts across the board there? I'll give you just a second to think about it there. Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Some of the elites of the country right now. Exceptional expectations across the board there. And the talk this entire offseason from the national perspective, I think certainly is that, okay, yeah, Oklahoma, they've probably got a good defense. They've probably got some good skill players. They lost all their offensive line. They're probably going to suck. They're only going to win 7 games. They have a difficult schedule. Well, if you actually break down the experience that is on this offensive line compared to some of those other teams that a lot of people are putting in the playoffs right now, Oklahoma has the most career starts on their offensive line than any of those programs I just mentioned. So Oklahoma, 123 career starts for the offensive, 125 rather, starts for the offensive line. Texas is second. They have a ton of experience, 123. And then after that, you've got Georgia at 80, Ohio State at 79, Alabama at 51. Alabama, I'll put an asterisk next to there because their website was not as great at counting the starts and recording that. So that number could be a little off a little bit. Take that with a little bit of grain of salt there. But overall, Oklahoma, the most career starts. Just the problem is that very few of them have actually happened at the University of Oklahoma. They've all transferred in.
Well, and that was the biggest eye-opening thing for me. When you put this in the group chat over the weekend, I think that I guessed twice wrong before you just flat out told me, hey, it's Oklahoma here. Oklahoma's got the most experienced offensive line. When you look at, some of these other, upper echelon teams in college football. And again, I think that those numbers, when you look at, total games started, I think that those numbers can be a little bit misconstrued because the starts from some of these guys, they came from guys that were playing at SMU. They were playing at USC and Florida and Michigan State. The Michigan State guy is probably not even going to be, in the 2 deep. We'll see how Bill Bedenbaugh shakes out. But I don't think that experience is always the end-all be-all when trying to forecast how well a group is going to be able to do. You can have 5 seniors playing on the offensive line, and that doesn't mean that it's going to equate to, productive, talented, dominant offensive line play. You've got to be able to put all the right pieces together. And I think that Bill Bedenbaugh is definitely the coach that can do that. But we posed this question, Adam, on Twitter here when trying to decide which offensive lineman do you have the most confidence in right now? And then for the most part, we got 5 different responses, all saying, Fabici and Wee-Woo. At Boomer Mason said it's hard not to say Branson Hickman. He's the cornerstone. Yeah, you make a really good point there, Mason. Obviously, your center, that's the foundation. That's the true pillar of your offensive line. Just ask Creed Humphrey and Patrick Mahomes. And, the fact that we've got Branson Hickman, who's, started 35 games over the course of his career, had one of the best PFF grades for an offensive lineman in the country last year, regardless of what, Power 4, Power 5, Group of 5 football that you're playing. So I like where your head's at there with Branson Hickman. At Switzer Boy says Eddie Pierre-Louis. That remains to be seen. Probably the most talented and, day one ready offensive lineman that Oklahoma's got going into this season as a true freshman. And then, Adam, this was where I was at, and I think that you probably echo the same sentiment. A lot of Jacob Sexton replies.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacob Sexton was a guy that probably didn't get enough run this spring in the headlines necessarily because he was rotating around between tackle and guard, and I think that's kind of Bill Bedenbaugh's style of let's just work everybody around, see where we can get everyone the best combination. But he's a left tackle, in my opinion. I think he's going to take over that. He started in 4 games at the end of last year. I thought he did really well considering that. He's going into his 3rd year in the program. And he's a guy that I feel like he might not be a first-round pick, but I think he's one of the next offensive tackle draft picks that comes out of the Bill Bedenbaugh, coaching tree necessarily there. And so I expect big things out of him. I just think and here's a good clip for those watching on YouTube. I wish I had a little bit better footage of this, but him running down the field like 30 yards down the field and just blasting a guy trying to make a tackle on the running back there. So I think Jacob Sexton is just flying a little bit under the radar because he wasn't at left tackle at every single snap in spring ball. And we shouldn't expect that. In fact, we should expect a lot of things that we heard in spring practice of, Bill Bedenbaugh is trying to figure out this offensive line. He's trying to put those puzzle pieces together and figure it out. And it would be surprising to me with, a fully experienced group of guys, if we were to hear yeah, it's all figured out. They're all gelled, because that's not Bill Bedenbaugh. Even when he has the experience returning, it's still until the 6th game of the year that we're like, oh, okay, those are our starting 5 for the rest of the season.
Well, and that's a luxury that Oklahoma's simply been able to afford,
True.
over the last decades, really the entire time that they've been in the Big 12, where really, it's kind of the catchphrase that we talk about every single offseason going into week 1 of the season, where, as long as you have your offensive line figured out by OU Texas, you can skate by and you can win these games going into Red River. You're just simply not going to be afforded that luxury. Yes, you're going to be able, I think, probably pretty safe bet. You start out with Temple, Houston, Tulane. You're going to be 3-0 coming out of those first 3 weeks, but then you've got a really tough 3-game stretch at them where this is really the meat and potatoes where you're going to be truly tested. You're going to find out what you've got in that position group on the offensive line. Tennessee's coming to Norman. You go on the road to Auburn and Jordan O'Hare. Then you get a bye week, and then you go down to Texas for Red River. And again, I've listed, there's 10 guys here on my notes. Troy Everett, 9 career starts. Fabici and Weewu, 24. Branson Hickman, 35. Sexton's got 4. Spencer Brown's got 28. Michael Tarquin, the guy that's been at Florida and recently USC, he's got 28. And then we've got a couple of young pups and Logan Hallen, Heath Ozeta, and Jake Taylor. So when you look at those 10 names, I definitely think that there's a good group of 5 to 6 right there that Bill Bedenbaugh is gonna be able to put together. But it's just going to be on him and his support staff to try to figure out, because you've got guys that are very versatile. I mean, we talked about it. Jake Taylor was playing left guard for most of spring ball. He's a guy that you just pegged. He's going to be starting at left tackle this year, and you're probably right. So when you've got this number of guys that are so versatile that can play a bunch of different spots, this is when it's on Bill Bedenbaugh to really try to utilize summer camp, but even more so fall camp, those 6 to 8 weeks of fall practice before you get in the regular season, where you've got to know who your top 6, maybe 7 are when Tennessee comes into Norman, because that's really where the season kind of begins.
That was the stat there, the Oklahoma leading all those programs in career offensive line starts. That was what I was alluding to at the beginning of the show, saying don't like the video yet. If you like that, like the video. If you like that, give us the 5-star review where you listen to podcasts, because I think that's something that just breaks the narrative down a little bit, not completely, because as you mentioned, Fabici Nwewu's 24 starts at North Texas, still good, not as good as if he did that at Georgia, for example. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's still a 4th-year player. He still was a second-team freshman All-American in his first year there in Denton. He helped the North Texas Mean Green, put up almost 200 yards per game on the ground over the last 2 years. And then you see that across the board. There's experience. A lot of guys, Branson Hickman, 35 starts, second-team All-AAC last year. You look at Troy Everett. He was also a second-team freshman All-American at App State. He's in his 4th year. You look at Michael Tarquin. He's in his 6th year of playing now. So it's really just a matter of can Bill Bedenbaugh put the pieces together? And that feels like such a dumb question to ask, because of course he can. It's Bill Bedenbaugh, but there's enough there to work with. It's okay, I feel like there's enough depth. And if Spencer Brown is your backup right tackle and he's started, 20 plus games in his career, hey, that's fantastic. If he's good enough to start, good too. But if he's your backup, you're in great shape, I feel like.
Sometimes a change of scenery can do wonders for a kid, whether that's, playing in a different program, playing for a different position coach, a different coaching staff. Sometimes that can do wonders. Ask Wanye Morris about that. Ask Tyler Guyton about that. Both guys that are going to be all-pro tackles here over the next few seasons in the NFL. And so, again, maybe it is unfair at this point in the stage to rule out Spencer Brown just because of what we heard over the course of spring practice. Maybe it's unfair to label, Michael Tarquin just from what we've seen from his time out there in LA and in Gainesville. Bill Bedenbaugh, he's a top 3 offensive line coach in the country. He's got the most offensive linemen in the NFL right now by school. He obviously knows what he's doing. He pushes all the right buttons. He will get it done. It's just a matter of, can you have this thing figured out by week 3 as opposed to week 6, week 7? Because if you don't have it figured out by week 6 or week 7, then you're going to be lipping into the month of October with possibly 2-3 losses on your schedule. And that's really when things are going to be tough, especially when you look and see what Oklahoma's got coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, normally you could kind of just work through things until Texas, because that was your first, big time talent you're going to face in the Cotton Bowl there. But Tennessee's going to bring a top 10 edge rusher to Norman on September 21st. Auburn is kind of reworking some of their defensive line with a lot of transfers, but they're going to have guys. They're going to have dudes still.
Walter Nolan at Ole Miss. Yeah. Alabama's got 2 or 3.
It's going to be an every week thing.
LSU's got him. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to run and hide.
But overall, I think there's enough there for Oklahoma to work with. As far as the fresh. Oh, go ahead.
Who starts?
That's kind of what I was just about to ask, because I feel like Jacob Sexton feels like your left tackle. I think Fabici is probably your left guard. Maybe he could play right guard as well. I think Branson Hickman is pretty solid in there at center, especially considering that Troy Everett is working through an injury right now. I think he'll be good enough at least by October 1st. Maybe he's good, game 1. So then that right guard position is interesting because you could go different directions there. Is it Jake Taylor? Is it Darian Hatchett? Is Troy Everett healthy? Is he ready for that?
Heath Ozada,
or Eddie Pierre-Louis. Maybe he's a good option there at guard. I think that's where probably your freshman is going to play, is there at that right guard position. I don't see I know we love Daniel Akinkumi and some of the other guys. They're younger. Maybe Eugene Brooks, he could play guard as well. I just don't see someone at tackle as a true freshman. That is so rare. Orlando Brown is the exception to the rule. I don't see guys playing tackle in their freshman year typically. So then that right tackle is a big question. Is that Michael Tarquin? Is that Spencer Brown? Could Jake Taylor play right tackle? That's probably my biggest concern is the tackle spot. And those are hard positions to really cover up, because if you are going to give them help with a tight end or running back, you're hurting yourself and giving the defense an advantage there by not having to cover as many players. So that's my biggest concern as right tackle. I feel pretty good about the left side through that right guard. I feel like there's enough options there. Someone at right guard will emerge. It's that right tackle where I'm like, I'm not sure.
In high level college football, the tackle position is something that you simply can't hide. If you've got one good tackle, then the coaching is good enough on the opposition. The talent and the scheme is good enough on the opposition. Look at LSU, for example. You think if Oklahoma's only got one reliable tackle, you don't think that they're going to line Harold Perkins up opposite of who the premier tackle is and try to take advantage of that. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing for me going into fall camp is I don't really know definitively what the right side of this offensive line is going to look like. We can try to project it, and I think that we probably have a little bit better of an idea regarding the right guard position. But when you try to forecast who's going to be playing right tackle, whether it is Jake Taylor, whether it is a Spencer Brown or a Michael Tarquin, I have no idea. And I think that that's probably what's got a lot of Oklahoma fans' anxiety level a little bit higher. I don't think it's so much the fact that we just simply don't have the talent or the guys on the roster to do it. It's just simply a lot of it's unproven, and a lot of the production has not been in an Oklahoma uniform before. So we just simply don't know what to expect. But we've got Bill Bedenbaugh, we've got Seth Luttrell, Joe John Finley. We've got arguably one of the best wide receiver corps in the country. Quarterback's going to be a stud. Running back position, no slouch either. Bill's going to get it done.
Yeah. What's crazy is you have 56 career starts between Spencer Brown and Michael Tarquin, and they're at the position there at right tackle where we're kind of like, oh, I don't know. Like, do we feel confident in that? It's crazy because they have 56 career starts between
and neither one of them might start. Neither one of them may start. is the crazy part.
Yeah, and that could be totally interesting if someone like Heath Ozada or Jake Taylor or who knows what Bill Bedenbaugh ends up at there.
Yeah.
Like, if one of those guys is good enough to pass up somebody with 28 career starts, like that's a fifth and sixth year player, like that's probably fantastic news. That means that some of the recruits that we've had over the last couple of years are panning out. And I think you should be pretty excited about that if those guys that are so experienced are your backups. So I don't know. I feel like there's enough there. I feel like it's on Bill Bedenbaugh to get that done and figured out before Tennessee comes to town. So it's a little bit earlier than he normally is used to, but I think he can do it.
And again, I'm pretty confident that this is how I'm going to feel for the next 3 months until this thing kicks off. But for me, this might be a little simplistic, but it really does boil down to this. The Oklahoma offensive line, this is the difference between 7-5 or 10-2. Possibly 9-3,
16-0. 16-0 on the table.
16-0. We'll be having a much different conversation on this podcast this time of year from now. So we'll but it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, it's really exciting right now. You've got media days coming up here in just a few more weeks. That's ultimately going to produce a lot of content. There's going to be a lot of things that get said by those coaches, by some of the media guys. That's going to make it a lot of fun to talk about and cover. But this is the best time of the year. We appreciate everybody on here for joining us. If you haven't followed us on Twitter, go or on X, whatever you want to call it. It's at the Mainline Pod. Adam has done a tremendous job putting out a ton of really good content. It's a little bit slow this time of year, but we've been creative. We're finding out some really good stuff that we can continue to pump out there regarding OU athletics, especially OU football. And as always, like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate you guys being here with us on YouTube, continuing to grow the brand that is this Red Dirt Media podcast. But yeah, Adam, that's about all I got. It's been a lot of fun, and I just can't wait. Chomping at the bit here. Football season is just a couple months away. What a time.
We will be 10 weeks away this time Friday at 6 p.m. from Oklahoma returning to Owen Field, which that feels so long, but also so short at the same time. So we'll be back next week to talk about who knows what else in regards to Oklahoma athletics. But until then, we appreciate everyone watching or listening, and we'll see you then.